Hi everyone, welcome to Ferrigno Freedom Channel. I'm Dante Ferrigno and I've been on a carnivore diet now known as the lion diet for over 4 years, and it has changed things in my life like I never thought changing the way I eat would change things. As you could tell from the opening picture that you might have seen were my before and after. A picture's worth 1,000 words. It sure has changed my life for the better. And one of the things I wanted to come and talk to you guys today about is the USDA once again. And I wanted to get a little perspective from somebody who's in the ranching industry. So today I'm going to have on the show Jeff Miles Moore of Big Mo Cattle out of Dixie, Georgia. Jeff has been on the show before talking about grass-fed cattle. So I'm going to have him come on in just a moment and we will ask him some questions about the USDA and what cattle ranchers need. Carnivore Bar compared to movie theater snack prices, it's no competition. With a tub of popcorn running you over $14, I'd much rather enjoy the salty, crunchy, meaty goodness of a carnivore bar any day. And I don't have to cheat to enjoy my night out. Carnivore Bar. Save 10 to 20% when you use my link in the description of this video.
Yeah, well, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too. How things been?
Good, excellent. Yeah, we're still doing the same stuff, still running like crazy. All the stuff going on here and 10 grandchildren and all the rest. So, yeah.
Fantastic. You still doing the carnivore diet?
Yeah, still carnivoring. And I've been on and off it, but I keep jumping back on. As a matter of fact, if you could smell it right now, in just about an hour, I'll have a big pan coming out that'll have, what's it got? It's got Ossobuco steaks, and it's got four big
I knew you were going to
things of
say
short
that.
ribs, and it has big chuck roast in it, and so all in one big pan. So it'll be my meat for the week, and for Shelly and I to eat. We'll have some tonight, and then I'll eat some throughout the week. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only time I'd ever heard of that uso busco was when you say it, and I figured he's going to say that first thing, and that was exactly what happened.
I love those things. Of course, you get that big bone in there, so you get all that marrow
Yeah.
that's in it's that leg bone for the shank meat, and so I eat those first. And then the ribs are just so good. I love those ribs with all that fat that's on them, and I love those things. So I'll chow down on those tonight before we go to the soccer match. My oldest granddaughter has her final game of the year tonight, and I'm expected to attend.
Okay,
So,
I guess we better get right into it because I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what the USDA is doing and what, from your perspective, should be happening with this Make America Healthy movement again, or what your perspective is on it, whatever it is, because I know you're right there on the ground as I wouldn't say small time rancher, but you have a smaller farm than most, I guess, based on what you've told me.
yeah, we don't pretend to be huge or anything, and obviously what we're trying to do here is to make the absolute healthiest possible protein source for people that we possibly can, because it's what our family eats and all of our kids and grandkids and everybody. I have to tell you, I picked up a half a cow yesterday to put in our freezer, and I went back there and looked at the pens of the animals that they were getting ready to process, and I looked at them and I went, why would somebody be processing these animals? There was no fat on them. They were not ready to be processed. But it's just, of course, they process whatever somebody brings them. And so there's no way those animals were ready to be processed. And I don't know any history of them. I don't know whether they were grain fed or grass fed or what they were, but they're just no reason those animals should be in there to be being cut up. But to each his own. Everybody's got their own desires and what they want to do, and I think that's what they should do. But if they ever had true grass-fed beef with fat on it and so forth, I think it'd be a different experience for them, for sure.
Sure.
As far as the USDA, I know everybody's crazy about the tariffs and that sort of thing. My feeling about the tariffs is that at the broader spectrum of what I see the tariffs doing and what Trump's doing with the tariffs, I'm all for it. Obviously, in America, if people that have been in agriculture, we've been dealing with tariffs of 30 to 50% for years. If you're a dairy farmer and you want to try to sell your milk up into Canada or whatever, or if you want to try to sell meat, we don't have the ability to sell meat to anybody hardly. We can't sell beef into different areas because the tariffs they charge on us are sky high. So we don't sell any. We are importers of beef in this country, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But so as far as the tariffs, to get on an equal playing field, hey, if you don't like the tariffs, let's everybody get rid of all of them. If nobody has any tariffs and we got an equal playing field, now we let the free market do what it needs to do. But that's not the way all this game is played. And so all my buddies that are farmers up in the north that are trying to do things with animal products, they can't sell stuff into Canada. They can't sell stuff abroad. And I have to harken back to is our story here with our animals and our Devon cattle that we imported here from New Zealand. The fellow that started this herd back so many years ago, these animals hadn't been fed any grain for over 80 years when I first got them, and I've had them for 20 some years. And they went through a time in New Zealand where they got rid of all of the farmer subsidies. What did that do? What that did was it made a level playing field for the people that wanted to farm. And you didn't have the farmer welfare stuff. And that's a sensitive subject for a lot of people. If you want really good food, then you've got to find somebody that's going to produce really good food, or you've got to produce it yourself. That's the bottom line. And most people have a life that they're not going to produce their own food. And so they're going to look to somebody that's going to hopefully grow it the way they would grow it if they had the opportunity to. And that's where people search out somebody like ourselves and try to get beef and so forth from somebody like me. But I think part of the problem that we're seeing is that a lot of people will take a look at beef, grass-fed beef especially, and they will not truly understand the differences between grass-fed beef and grain-fed beef. And it's just a matter of ignorance and education of seeing what's really different about it. And a lot of what's done to us by the government is they allow people to play the game here so the consumer doesn't really know what they're getting. So beef can come into this country in a lot of different forms. And if it comes in any form and then it gets manipulated somehow, and what does that manipulation mean? That means it might be cut up here. It might be cooked here. It might just be reboxed here. They're allowed to put product of USA on that product. So people will be thinking, oh, I'm getting United States beef, and they're not. They absolutely are not.
And there's no way out, is there?
No, and there's no way to find out. So if we could ever get true labeling of origin, so if you send me sides of beef from Uruguay and you send it here and it's just cut up here and put in a package and put it on the store shelves, it should say a product of that country. It shouldn't say USA beef, in my opinion. But that's not what's done. There's so many things that are done in agriculture to make it so the big players can produce their product and get it into the stores and marketing wise. And I get that. I understand why they do it. And that's why there's been a laxing of organic standards. That's why there's been all of these different things that go on. And obviously, when you take a look at the big processors in the beef markets, those big processors are not owned by American companies. They're owned by Brazilian companies. They're owned by companies that are not American. And they do that so that they can bring their beef up here because they get so much more for it here than they do in their country. And they can raise that beef. When you take a look at some of these processors that are down there, and the farmers that are down there, they got such massive herds and they're producing a tremendous amount of beef. And they've got some good beef. I'm not going to knock their beef. They've got some decent beef, but there isn't anybody that is really inspecting, controlling, what they're feeding them, and all the rest. It's a crapshoot. It's an absolute crapshoot. If you don't have a source for that product, you just have to try to say, hey, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to do the best I can. So what am I going to do? I might get organic beef. The truth be known, most of the organic beef comes out of, when you're taking a look at organic grind and so forth in the United States, it's coming out of the organic dairy herds. That just means that they were fed organic corn. Organic beef doesn't mean that it's grass fed, and it may spend some time on a little bit of grass before it's killed, but you and I have had those discussions as to what that really means. When I take a look at the Make America Healthy movement, I am all for it. I'm all for it, hook, line, and sinker. But it's a tall task. And
Yeah.
I think podcasts like yours and channels like yours that are teaching people how to identify healthy eating styles and what they can do, it's funny. It's magic, but it's not magic. You and I both know that if we don't put that processed food in our bodies, then all of a sudden a lot of our aches and pains go away. And it's funny, when I get off the carnivore diet for a little while and then I go and I play a pickleball tournament, man, everything is sore and it's inflamed and all the rest. But when you're eating the proper foods and feeding your body properly, you just don't have the recovery time's better. Everything's better for me anyway. That's just part of it. But I think you and I can sit here and talk about where is somebody going to find healthy food. And obviously Whole Foods is where a lot of people think, I'm going to go to Whole Foods and I'm going to get my food at Whole Foods. And Whole Foods has a program when you supply, and I've got some buddies that supply to Whole Foods, and I've just always said, I'm not doing that because we're so far beyond what they are setting as a benchmark, because they have a system for like their animal welfare system. And that animal welfare system was funded and started by Whole Foods, which was a cool thing when it first started. I was all for it, and I thought this is really neat. But if you take a look at it, it's like 1 through 5 or 6. And like 1 just means you've got some animals and you don't beat them, basically. But then like number 5 is that the animal was born where it's lived its whole life and it's been taken well care of, and yada, yada, yada. And then there's levels all in between there. And I
So
think
5 was the best rating. 5 was a good rating.
Yeah, 5 or 6, something like that. I don't completely remember, but it's somewhere in that area. But when you take a look at how many people are like we are, to where the animal is born here, it's never left here, and it goes directly to a processor. There's very few of those kinds of people that are doing that. There's a few, but there's not many. If you take a look at Whole Foods and you say there's a couple of thousand producers, which would be those people that are in the 5 or 6 range, there's not many of those. There's very few of those. That's where if people can find somebody and work with somebody to get them that food, then they're so much better off. And there's tons of those people out there nowadays. The internet's full of people that are advertising and doing it, but it takes a little work. And then just like for you, when you came to see us, you got to see exactly how we raise our animals and what we do. There's no secrets here other than we just give them all the forage they can possibly stand, and we move them, and we give them apple cider vinegar in their water, and we make mineral water for them, and we make sure they've got good forage and that sort of thing. But I would encourage people to go take a look at it. Go try to find a producer that's doing it the way that you think you would like to have an animal, like you would do it. And there's a place for people that are doing it the industrial way, but it's not where you and I necessarily want to be. It's not what we want to eat. I think when I take a look at the USDA and what they're doing in the government with Make America Healthy, I would sure like to see them restrict food stamps to only live food. You can't buy Hostess Twinkies with food stamps. You can't buy soda pop with food stamps.
By
You
live
can buy
food, you
eggs.
meat or vegetables and things like that
Yes,
that were alive or are still being stored as alive.
exactly. But you just can't buy junk. And part of the problem when I go to the grocery store and I'm there picking something up and I see food stamps being used, I'm looking at the food value of what I see people putting down there, and there's just nothing there. There's nothing there that's going to nourish their body.
It's
And
making
so
them
then
unhealthy.
it's nothing to making them healthy. When you take a look at this movement, I think the government can be very helpful, but then you get into the situation of the government telling you, what you're going to spend your money on, but it is taxpayer dollars. And,
And we pay for Medicaid and things like that.
exactly. So if we can get people to eat healthy food, and you and I both know, just like, right now and there, I am making, meat for the next 3 or 4 days. I threw it on the grill to brown it. I put it in a pan. I put some bone broth on it. I covered it with a bunch of salt, put a piece of aluminum foil on it, and stuck it in the oven for 3.5 hours. It's not hard. It's so easy. It's pathetically easy. And now I've got all of that meat in there that I can eat for the next few days anytime I get hungry. It just isn't that difficult. And let's face it, hamburger is fantastic. Hamburger is just an incredible thing.
Yeah.
And how difficult is it for somebody to make a hamburger? And once you start eating a carnivore type of a lifestyle and you just get rid of the bun, after a while you realize that you didn't need it. That bun wasn't needed. And I know it's what we're used to eating, but the bun isn't needed. And you just start figuring out how to eat that stuff and without all the carbs.
I think one of the things a lot of people in the carnivore community are concerned about is they'd like to see more ranchers doing like you're doing. What could the government do to facilitate that more? You mentioned removing subsidies for things like corn, but it seems like that would make it harder. I don't know how it would all play. How would you think that would play out to make it easier for more local ranchers? It seems like stuff at the local level always works better.
It's an interesting time right now because right now, Dante, most people probably aren't aware of this, but the cow market has never been this high. Never.
Meaning there's that many more cows than normal or more people buying them?
No, there's just the value of them is so high. For example, I can take a steer. We don't, but because we sell everything to families to eat. But if there's plenty of people that are taking steers to the market that are weanling steers, say a 5 weight, which is 500 pounds, and they're getting almost $2,000 for that steer. They're getting almost $2,000 for that animal right off the mama cow. And we've never seen prices like that. That's 4 times what I have seen in the past. And it's not going to stay that way forever. It's going to change and go back. But right now, cattle farmers are making really good money on cattle. And there's a shortage of cattle. And cattle producers are doing very well right now. Now, their expenses on other things are up, obviously, are different costs. But I'm not a person that is all about the ethanol farming. I don't believe that we should have all those subsidies in the Corn Belt. I realize there's a lot of guys that make their living off of it, and it's a difficult thing for them. But you and I both know that corn's not good for our health. Now they're using it to make ethanol, but you and I also know that if we use that ethanol in our weed eaters and all the other things, it tears up the inside of our machinery.
Yep.
And one of the things that I think is fascinating is that you've probably seen this is that when Trump came out and he announced the Gulf of America, I thought, well, that's an interesting thing. And then here just recently, I was reading about how they have found these huge oil reserves that they can go and get now in the Gulf of America. So you have to go, I think this was part of a plan.
Yeah.
So it's probably oil reserves that they already knew were there. And the stuff that I've read on these oil reserves that are out there in the Gulf is that they are larger than anything. And obviously, he has opened up stuff in Alaska. So if we've got all this fossil fuel that we can get to, and we can become totally independent, I'm not so sure we need ethanol. Ethanol comes from a subsidy of the corn. But what if you took all of that corn land and turned it into pasture land to raise really good grass-fed beef? And you supplied the market with grass-fed beef for people to eat instead of doing the ethanol. My personal thought is it's going to be better for the environment. It's going to be better for the world. It's going to be better for the carbon footprint. Everything's going to be
better for the land.
Better for the land. If you can build that land up with all of the excrement from that cattle produce and building that soil. And for any of your listeners that have not gone on and looked up the Carbon Cowboys and seen their YouTubes, they really ought to, because it is very educational. There is another site that you can go to that's fascinating. If you go to the NASA site, it shows how the earth heats up when we plow the ground. There is a tremendous site that you can go to that shows the temperatures of the soil and our environment through the seasons as it starts in January all the way through December. And you'll notice that the colors of the map change, and you'd think it's going to be super hot in July and August, and it's not. When it's super hot, it's when the land is being heated up once it's tilled. So it gets the hottest time is in March and April. And then the hottest time again is once again when they harvest. And they've taken that covering off of the soil of all the plants that are there. If we're concerned about the heating of our environment and so forth, it's going to be a whole lot better for us not to be tilling the soil and planting all this corn to make ethanol. We're a lot better off to make permanent pasture out of that land and let the water seep into the land. When you take a look at all this land with a growing solar panel on it, the water goes in better, it replenishes our aquifers better. Everything is better on pasture than it is on a tilled surface, without a doubt. And as grass is a cellulose, it's woody product. It's cellulose. And a cow, or ruminant animals are the one creatures that can take that cellulose because of their ruminant stomach, and they can make us a very high quality product for us to live on. And obviously, you're living on it almost totally if you're doing the lion diet. And that's all from an animal that can take that cellulose in. And obviously, our bodies can't do that. A horse can't do that. But a cow can do it. Sheep can do it. Goats can do it.
Ruminants.
Yeah. And as far as the things that the USDA can do, getting back to your question, is I think origin of labeling is number one. I think the consumer needs to know what they're eating for real, not smoke and mirrors. And I think that if the United States wants to be able to export more products, they need to start getting rid of these chemicals. All the things that we know about atrazine and glyphosate and all these other chemicals that are being sprayed isn't good. It's not good. That's the reason they're not allowed in other countries. And bravo for the other countries of not taking our products. But if the United States would buck up here and do away with all of that, I think it would be a positive move for sure. And I think that's what needs to be done. Is it harder for us to grow our pastures without all those chemicals? Not really. Not really. We don't do that much. Our fertilization program is we put out some fish oil and we make compost tea. We make our own compost tea and fish oil. And that's what we put on our pastures, and our cattle flourish on it. Does it give us the same response that somebody does when they go buy this high dose nitrogen? No, it doesn't. But it's healthier for the animals, and it's healthier for the environment. It's healthier for us. It's healthier for the wildlife. It's healthier for the bees and the butterflies and all the life that's in the soil. So If we can improve human habitat, human health, and animal health all at the same time, it just seems to me it's got to be a win-win situation for sure.
What
So
about making it affordable for people? One of the things that I hear when I talk to farmers is that if without atrazine and things like that, that they couldn't even break even because they say that when they do spray it, they can tell the difference where they missed a spray. If it went without it for a few feet, it's like a huge difference. So I don't know. It's hard for me to understand what to believe, except that they might have to do more ranching, is what it sounds like, and less farming is what you were looking at.
obviously, when you take a look at industrial farming just on its by itself, before World War II, we didn't have ammonia nitrate and we didn't have fertilizer. And so industrial farming wasn't the thing like it is after World War II. And so there's all kinds of things that can be done to farm without those chemicals. It's proven day in and day out. Take a look at Joel Salatin up in Virginia and what he's doing. He's not using any of that stuff. And
Salatin?
yeah. And look at some of his videos and some of the things that Joel's done. And he is raising grass-fed beef. He's raising chicken. He's raising pigs. He's raising rabbits. He's raising all kinds of things. He's got laying operations and all with movable structures and so forth. So it can be done. And he's farming up there, and he is making full-time salaries for everybody in his family. And they have a tremendous way of farming. When you take a look at all these chemicals and you say, okay, most all your corn, all of your cotton, your soybeans, all of those crops are Roundup ready. They are using those chemicals and so forth because for a farmer to make it, a farmer's had to get bigger. And it means bigger means higher priced equipment, higher priced everything is more. And if a guy's not farming 1,000 acres nowadays, it's probably hard for him to, as a row crop farmer. But I don't know. When you take a look at cotton and you say, I'm going to spray this stuff on cotton, and then all your clothes are made with that cotton, and those chemicals are going in you, what's the ultimate price that you're paid for it? I realize it's not an easy thing. At this point in time, when people start talking about being able to eat cost effectively, can you have filet mignon every night? Probably not. But you can sure have a hamburger. The last time I was in Sam's, I think I saw a hamburger for less than $4 a pound. And people can get protein, they can eat. We've got to pick what we eat and what we put in our bodies. And but my goodness, the processed food that people are buying is so expensive compared to some real food. Everybody would love to have steaks and all the rest. And I think a lot of times when we're on the carnivore diet, we think I'm sacrificing by eating this way, I deserve a steak. There's plenty of people that are eating the carnivore diet on hamburger and cheaper cuts.
Yeah.
So it can be done. That's what I would encourage people to do. And I don't pretend to have all the answers because I'm not a row crop farmer. I see what's gone on. I see the problem with the farmers and the seed that they have to buy and the controls that are put on this Roundup Ready stuff. You can't keep your own seed anymore and plant your crop next year. You've got to buy that expensive seed again because Monsanto has got the patent on that stuff. And so you're not allowed to keep your own seed. It used to be a farmer would keep some of his crop back and he could replant his own seed, but you can't do that anymore. There's maybe a handful of seed cleaners left anymore because Monsanto has made sure that they were put out of business. And I don't even know one in my area here. There are some people that are still trying to grow some more organic seed crops and so forth and keep their own seed, but it's not easy. Not easy to do it. You're definitely bucking the system for sure. And part of the issue is the system is set up for the row crop farmers that are using these chemicals to keep doing it. That system is in place. And
that's what I get the sense when I talk to them is that we couldn't break even without it. It's like it was created this way. And it's a lot like our medical system. It seems to be geared around keeping people just sucked in and constantly going to the doctor for nothing and treating symptoms and not actually curing anything. And
Right.
these type of decisions seem to be leading us into a bottleneck where there's no choice at some point, and then we have these mass illnesses or where they're killing a lot of animals. And it just seems if it was done more at the ground level and there was more open up for the market, if ranchers can make money on beef, then there should be more people getting into beef, I would think. That's the way
It's
a
just,
free market's supposed to work.
yeah, it's just the cost right now for somebody to get started in the cattle business is higher because they're bringing so much more money. So it's just very difficult. You've got to start small and you got to keep growing and growing. And you got to remember that in the beef industry, there isn't 5% of cattle producers across the country that have more than 100 head of cattle. Most of the cattle producers in the United States have less than 100 head. There's a lot of small producers. And just like we were talking about selling your calves at the sale barn. For us at our farm, since the way we sell our beef, we haven't changed our prices, even though the prices that the guys are getting when they're taking stuff to the sale barn are 4 times what they were getting. We don't sell that way, and so we haven't raised our prices to do any of that. We're still doing what we did 3 or 4 years ago. And the guys that have the cattle right now, they are making really good money on their calves. And when you take a look at that, hey, more power to them. I'm all for guys doing it the way they want to do it. And so taking those animals to the sale barn right now, a backgrounder will buy those cattle and they'll take them home and they'll either put them on feed or put them on pasture and get them up to a heavier weight. And then they'll send them probably to a finishing yard somewhere. And that's where that animal is on so many different locations. And that's where you get into a situation where that animal has to have all the vaccinations and it has to have all the shots and all the things that they do because they're traveling, they're in different environments and so forth. So that's where the benefit of finding somebody where their cattle are born there on that place and they don't ever leave there. It's the best form of it that you can do. But there's no reason that people can't do it all over this country, and they do, but it needs to be a lot more of it. And then the other problem we have is having the processing facilities to get the animal processed in a timely basis. There's that, what comes first, the chicken or the egg kind of a thing. But there's no doubt about it. I'm fortunate here to have 5 different processors within an hour of me. Now you have to call around and get a slot, what they call a kill slot, that you can get on a date that you can have your animals there. But there's numerous processors around us that we can get animals processed, and it's not like that everywhere. So you'll find out west there's a lot of mobile processors of guys that are going out to the farm and processing the animals right on the farm. That's another way of doing it.
Are there any unnecessary regulatory barriers to new ranchers getting into it or new processors getting into the business?
Yeah, I don't see them as unnecessary things. You got to have good fencing from a liability standpoint. You need to have fresh water, and then you need to have grass and forage that the animals are going to flourish on. Once you get those and you've got some working facilities so that you can do what you need to do with the animals, then it's just a matter of getting the knowledge and getting the kind of animals that will do what you want them to do. When you're doing grass-fed beef, you're looking for an animal that will actually finish and put on fat on grass. And there's a lot of animals that are in the industrial feed system. They're what we call a high maintenance type animal. They're going to take corn to finish. And then obviously once you put that corn in them, that's when you jack up your omega-6s and you don't have the omega-3s like we get in the grass-fed beef. And it isn't as healthy a product for you. It's not as good for your heart. It's not as good for your body to have the grain-fed beef. That's where I always find it funny when people get all crazy about the Wagyu beef and so forth. And they just They charge such a high dollar for it, and it's the unhealthiest beef you could possibly eat. But it's very tender and tasty because the fat is where the flavor is. But those animals that need that all that corn to finish, that's what makes the Wagyu beef the way it is. One of the things that we do is with the acetic acid, it gives us the ability, since those cattle are getting vinegar every day, it gives them the ability to break down that cellulose and get the sugars out of the grass better than if they didn't have it. So what makes cattle finish on forages is the bricks in the grass, the bricks in the forages, the sugars in there. And then obviously you want the cattle to be able to utilize those sugars as the best they can, because that's what fattens them. That's why you and I don't want to eat sugar, because it fattens us and it's not good for our system. But in the cattle world, that fat that we want marbling in the beef, because that's where the omega-3s are, that's what does it. It's the sugars in the grass. We're trying to do everything we can to get the bricks of our grass as high as we can, and to get the cattle to be able to utilize that cellulose as best as we can.
And you can do all that without chemicals, and
Yep.
the price is relatively the same as it would be doing it the other way.
No, what'll happen is somebody that can buy cheap corn and can buy cheap feed, they can get an animal to finish in 16 months. They can make them ready to slaughter. And we can't get anything done that fast. It's going to take us a full 2 years to 2.5 years to get an animal on just a forage only diet. So we're having to hold that animal 6 months to another year longer than somebody is in corn. And so when they can put that kind of starch in them, but then that's also, you got to remember, Dante, that's where your acidosis comes from. That's where your disease comes from. That's where the problems come from, is all of that corn in the rumen gets that rumen very hot, and the acid is built up. And so that's where you get your diseases. And that's where you get a recall of hamburger, you get a recall of beef, because that acidosis has gotten on the meat and tainted it. But you virtually don't have, on true grass-fed beef, you don't have that. We don't have that acidosis. We don't have that problem because the cows don't get sick. They don't get that. When you go to a feed yard, those animals are getting a tremendous amount of sodium bicarbonate to control that acid in their stomach. And when you take a look at a feed yard, they're pumping so much of that corn in that rumen, and it's all that acid that's in there, and they're trying to control that with feeding them in that feed mix they have. The largest user of baking soda in our country is the feed yard industry. They use a tremendous amount of baking soda, but that's where the disease comes from. Anything that we see a system that's been put together to where we say we're going to make cheap food, God's designed this stuff to work in a certain way. And when we try to go outside that, in my opinion, we're going to have problems. And if we try to raise too many cattle on too small a piece of land and we don't manage the cattle, we're going to need a drug. We're going to need a stopgap of some kind to try to put out the fire that we've caused. And, that's all of the different pharmaceutical drugs that we have. It's all of the management practices with wormer and all the stuff that we pour on. When you think that most cattle producers are pouring wormer, or they're injecting wormer in the cows all the time, they're doing it a couple times a year. And it's just pesticide. It's pure pesticide that they are pouring on those animals. And we don't use any wormer. We haven't used wormer for a decade or longer than that. We haven't used wormer for probably 16, 18 years. And it isn't necessary. You don't have to do it. Now, if I was going to try to raise a commercial herd and really stock heavy and all that kind of stuff and run them onto the feed yard and so forth, then you might have to do that. And farmers back before World War II and before they had all these things, they had to figure out how many animals that they could raise on their pasture and do a good job without all those chemicals. So what did they do? They had to reduce their numbers to where the load wasn't high enough to where they had these problems. We're not really doing necessarily anything new. We're just doing what they did before they had chemicals and trying to do as good a job as we can to keep these animals as pure and clean as we can. Now, we do use a bentonite clay that we feed the cattle that is a binder of toxins, and we put it out free choice for them, and we let them eat that clay. They'll lick it as they need it, and we'll even put out a little baking soda for them at certain times of the year, and they'll eat it as they need it. The cattle do a great job of figuring out what they need, and they know better than I know what they need, and so we just leave it out for them free choice. And but that's, I think, as far as everybody has to decide how they want to raise their animals, just like you and I decide how we want to feed our bodies. We decide what we're going to put in our bodies and how we're going to live. And I don't want to tell people necessarily how they should live. The comments I made about the food stamps, the only reason I'm saying that is because it's taxpayer dollars that are paying for it. And I know the damage they're doing their bodies. And even though they can't have Hostie's cakes for breakfast in the morning, you and I both know that's the worst thing they can be giving their kids. Frosted Flakes and all the rest is the worst thing you could send your kids to school with in their bellies. So how much better would it be if you'd take the time to make them some eggs? I was listening to your call-in that you had, about a week ago or so, and your wife was talking about hard-boiled eggs and so forth. And I gotta be honest with you, when I go out and I play these pickleball tournaments and stuff, that's what I take with me. I take hard-boiled eggs with me, and I just keep them in a bag, and I just pop them in, and that's what I eat to give me a charge in between games and so forth. It's just some hard-boiled eggs. They're incredible. Give the kids some hard-boiled eggs before they go off to school, and forget about the Twinkies and the pancakes and all the rest. That's my opinion.
I know most people are worried about the prices of the meat and things like that. And I think the ultimate problem with the prices of everything is bad financial policy that we've had for at least since we came off the gold standard. So this may not be the best forum to address that, but I know a lot of my viewers want to see them be able to do all this and keep the prices low. And they're going to have to do a lot more to get that situation fixed. Getting all the tariffs away might have something play a role in that. Getting a real free market would open it up for more people to do all of these things, which typically brings prices down. And that's why I'd like to see more people getting into cattle ranching so that there would be more availability to match the demand that's growing as more and more people are looking at carnivore diets for health solutions too.
Sure, absolutely. And we have so many different people that get beef from us, and it's fascinating to watch all the different people that are getting the beef, and they are finding this carnivore diet, and they're finding this method of eating and what it's doing for them. It is so rewarding, and I talk to people about it all the time. I tell people about your channel all the time, and there's so many people that it just changes everything for them. It changes everything for them. And people, everything from keto, and there's a lot of people say, man, there's just no way I could do that. I just can't give up my sweets, and I can't give up that. If there's something on fire, if you're hurting, if you got a gut problem, if you've got all these other things, then all of a sudden, if you get people to do it for just a month, and then they realize how much better they feel, and a lot of times they'll go off of it, and then they'll go back to feeling terrible again, and they'll go, I got to get back on it. I got to get back on it. And I've been there. I've done the same thing. And it just makes such a difference. But it just really shows you all the bad stuff that we've been putting in our bodies. And there's all the things that we ate for so long, and we didn't realize they were as bad as they were. The processed foods, we didn't realize they were doing the damage that they were doing to us. The seed oils, just so incredible. Yeah. So incredible. And,
you're absolutely right. I got an anxious dog over here begging to go outside, so I guess that's my cue to let you know we've got all we need. Besides, you've covered everything we wanted to talk about with regard to ranching and the USDA. Seems like it's a very difficult nut to crack all the way around. But in summary, what were the 2 or 3 things you think the USDA should do next?
if they want to really do stuff for healthy food, I think they need to make it to where the farmers can produce the healthy stuff effectively, efficiently. If you're going to give a subsidy to a farmer, give it to a farmer that's producing healthy food, not one that's pouring chemicals on our land and poisoning our streams. That's what I would like to see them do. I'd like to see a system to where they're rewarding the people that are doing it the best methods for our environment. And I'd like to see them stop allowing people to spend dollars on unhealthy food.
Food stamp.
Make the dollars, make the food stamps for, you can buy all the eggs you want, you can buy the milk you want, you can buy the meat you want, you can buy the fish, the chicken. Let's face it, if you go to the grocery store, you can still buy chicken for under $1 a pound if you buy the certain stuff.
Yeah.
So there's protein. Buy tuna fish. There's a lot of things you can buy. But just stay out of the potato chips and stay out of the processed foods. They shouldn't, I just don't think they should be buying processed foods with that. And it's going to make it a little more work on, but moms love their kids and they love doing what's good for them. And I think that they'll do the right thing if we set it up properly.
I had one farmer mention to me one last thing to go with the third thing, maybe, is he had said that if SNAP was not under the USDA, but was rather under something like HUD, Housing and Urban Development, that it might make more sense.
I don't know. I think it's going to be the kind of thing where, and I can't say that I know that much about SNAP and all the rest. I don't know if they can spend the money on anything and everything. I don't know if they can buy alcohol with it. I don't think they can buy cigarettes with it. I don't know what all they can buy with it. I do know that they are allowed to use food stamp to go on cruises. I've seen that. You're allowed to use they will fill the cruise ships up with people that have money left on their cards. And I have seen that.
Wow.
I don't know what I'll do.
I've never been on a cruise, so I can't afford one.
Yeah. Evidently they're allowed to do it because they got it approved because they get 3 meals on the cruise ship. And so they get all their food and all that kind of stuff. So they're allowed to use those. So that's what I understand. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think that's true. So
I'd have to look into that one. That sounds, man, oh my goodness. If that's the case, that's just one more Doge story, it seems like, where they're finding crazy ways that we're spending money we shouldn't be. Yeah, I appreciate your time today. I know you got to go spend some time with some family there. So I'll let you get running, and I got a dog begging to get out.
All right. It's good to see you, Dante.
It's good to see you too, Jeff. Take care.
Be blessed. Bye-bye.
So that's it for Jeff. Just wanted to come back and tell you guys I appreciate you joining in so that we can talk about these things. It can really be a big pickle to try to figure out this whole mess when it comes to the mess we've got ourselves in. With steps in the right direction, I think we can get there. With the Lord's help, we can get there. Don't give up, folks. We're going to keep trying to get more and more people healthy and try to get our government to be doing the things that it should be doing, or even better, less of the things it shouldn't be doing. So that's my thought on it. I'd love to hear what you think in the description and the comments below. Go ahead and let me know, and I'll see you guys next time.
If we pay extra, could we maybe get some grease or fat?
Hey, it's Dante Ferrigno. I just wanted to thank you first of all for watching this video, but I also wanted to tell you about my merch shop. I have a link in the description for a bunch of different items I've put together for you to be able to show your support for the carnivore lifestyle, and every purchase helps me to keep doing what I'm doing here on Ferrigno Freedom.